So now we're ready to install the tremolo, and the best way we found of doing this is to install all the other components at the same time. So I'll put the neck on, we'll put the scratch plate on, and then we can line the tremolo up and make sure that the top and the bottom E strings run nice and parallel all the way through to the nut. So typically you would just put the neck on first, and then you can drop your scratch plate on, put your trem in and just move things about if you need to. But with this being a 22 fret neck, the first thing we're going to have to do is put the scratch plate on. So we're just going to basically just drop that into place. Hopefully that sits nicely. It does. And then we'll put our neck on and we'll screw that down. We're not going to screw it all the way down. We're going to basically just screw it finger tight so that we can still move this neck around a little bit if we need to. That's in. It's looking good around the horn there. It's fitted quite nicely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop the trem in, but I'm going to have the top and the bottom E strings, and we're just going to make sure that the strings run nice and parallel down the neck and don't hang off the edge of the fretboards. Okay, so top and bottom E strings are in. Just going to drop that in. Okay, so top and bottom E string are on. And you can see that the strings are not very tight. There's enough slack so that I can move this trem a little bit if I need to, and you can see that I can position it up or down just to make sure that I get these strings running nice and parallel down the neck. That looks pretty good to me. The other thing I'm going to do is leave a gap of about 1 millimeter just at the back of the scratch plate, and then you should find that that'll be 25.5 inches from the middle of your saddles to the middle of the nut. It's usually pretty accurate, especially with one of our bodies. So then it's just really just a case of marking things out. I have got a marker pen here. It's quite difficult to see because it's red, but I am going to mark these holes. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And also you can adjust the neck as well if you need to. If you find that it's way out, you can't get the strings to run parallel, you can loosen the screws in the neck and just sort of tap the neck either way till you get it all lined up nicely. But that's, so we can move that out of the way now. Just put it over there for a second. And then it's just a case of marking the holes for the scratch plate. Again, I could use the marker pen, but it's not, I don't want to mark the scratch plate either, so I've just got something I can just create a little indentation in each of the holes. And there we go, so I can take the scratch plates off, take the neck plate off, and then we'll start to drill these holes and then put everything back on. We could, if we wanted, put the jack plate on as well, and position that in and mark that off as well. What I find is when you've got your output jack socket at the back here, it tends to protrude quite away, so when you are fitting this, if you've not already got your jack socket in there, try and sit it a bit further forward, almost so it's at the edge of the cavity there, and that way you shouldn't get a problem with your jack getting caught on the inside of the cavity. I've already marked this out, I think. Yeah, it's already been marked out, that, so we'll drill that as well at the same time. So now we've got all the screw holes marked out for the tremolo and for the scratch plate. You probably can't see them on the video because it's a black body and the marker is red, but they are there. So we're going to drill those out now. I'm using a 2.5mm drill bit. Normally we'd use the drill press, but we can't get the clearance around the drill press to get these holes drilled, so we're just going to do them by hand. We're not going very deep anyway, so it's not too much of a problem. So this is a 2.5mm drill bit, and what I've done is I put a little bit of masking tape around the end just so I know how deep to go, and then we're going to use a 2mm drill bit when we do the holes for the scratch plates. So we'll get those done. Okay, so hopefully you can see that all those holes are drilled now, and the scratch plate should fit perfectly into those holes. Making sure I've not missed any. I have missed one. And one thing we've noticed is if you try to put screws into these small screw holes, you tend to find that the finish around the screw hole is going to crack. So what we've done is we've got a slightly bigger drill bit. This one is 4.5mm, and we've actually flattened the end of the drill bit off, and then when we put that over the top of these holes we can wear away the finish around them, and that way when we put the screw in it won't crack. So I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so there, as you can see, just worn away the finish from around the edges of the hole, so that when we put the screws in now we won't get that cracking of the finish around the sides. I've just noticed I missed one. So there we go, that's all finished, ready for the scratch plate and stuff to be put back on. Okay, so now all the holes are drilled, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the tremolo into the cavity, and then we'll fit the claw and the springs a little bit later. This is a knife edge tremolo, so it will need to be screwed down all the way to lift it up at the back. With this tremolo as well, it's a Wilkinson trem, and on the very back of there is a little grub screw hole which you use basically to tighten the tremolo arm. This one's quite tight at the moment, so I'm just snapping it off. With this kind of trem you really need to fit the tremolo arm before you fit the trem into the onto the body. It's very difficult to adjust this screw afterwards. Basically you just need to tighten it up finger tight. You don't want to tighten it up too much because it's quite easy to strip the threads. It's only a fine screw, and then you can see that that doesn't move now. Then you can remove it once you've done that, and then screw the tremolo down. I'm going to be doing the same thing with the screws as I do with all the screws that I fit into a guitar body, and that is coating them in wax first, just to make them a little bit easier going in. They don't tend to get stuck then, it's a lot more difficult to strip the threads on them. Okay, so the screws are in and the trem is in place. You want a bit of flexibility in the back of that trem, so you want to undo each of those screws by about a quarter of a turn, and that will give the trem the ability to rock forwards and backwards. Now that's done, it's just a case of fitting the tremolo claw. So to fit the tremolo claw is very simple. It's really just a case of positioning that in the cavity there, and then somewhere I've got a marker pen. I'm just going to mark off where I want the holes to go. There we go. Really simple. I've got a few springs that I'm going to fit in there in a second. So it's just really just a case of drilling a couple of holes. They are very difficult to do, but the wood, especially in this body, these are older bodies, so the wood is quite soft. It's just really a case of drilling a pilot hole and then letting the screw do the work. So it can be a bit awkward to get in. And then a screwdriver. I'm not screwing them in all the way, I'm just going to screw them into the end of the thread. And then just attach the springs. Oops. And that's great. You can obviously adjust the tension. If you want more tension on the trem, you can screw those screws a little bit further in, or if you want a bit less tension, obviously you can unscrew them a little bit. But that's pretty much it, they're done.